Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today sitting down for my review of Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Ladies and gentlemen, this game is coming in at a whopping 150 gigabytes, but I promise you it is worth every single ounce of your hard drive space. It's coming out on April 28th for the price of $70 on PS5, Xbox Series consoles, and PC. And boy howdy, is it worth it. Ladies and gentlemen, Star Wars Jedi Survivor is the, Matty's gonna say the P word, perfect sequel. Oh my gosh, does this remind me so much of the leap we saw from Batman Arkham Asylum to Arkham City. What I mean by that is that Jedi Survivor is a true evolution of every core pillar established in its first entry, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, while also expanding in new and interesting ways upon those original ideas. Much of the same happened with Arkham Asylum. It was seemingly unfathomable that we got this brand new AAA Batman game. It had free flow combat, it had stealth gameplay, it had the attention to detail, the boss appearances, and you thought, how could you go up from here? But then suddenly Arkham City rolls around. It's an open world. It's got an absolutely jaw-dropping finale. And on top of that, it expands on those core pillars like free flow combat, like stealth gameplay, in meaningful, interesting ways. And every single time I was hopping back into Star Wars Jedi Survivor, I couldn't help but think of this comparison here. That significant leap that doesn't necessarily alienate the original product being Jedi Fallen Order, but when you look at what Jedi Survivor does, it truly is an achievement in expanding the characters that exist, the story that is there in a very interesting manner, might I add, as well as the plethora of new tools and gameplay mechanics that you can use to explore its vast open world sections. Star Wars Jedi Survivor is some of the best Star Wars we've got in a while. I am a Star Wars junkie, keep that in mind, but seriously, even I can admit we've had some low lows. The second half of Jedi Survivor is foot on the gas, never letting up, absolutely incredible Star Wars storytelling. Respawn gets it in a really unique way, and it deserves to be celebrated. So Respawn, take a bow here. This is not what I'd call the Hogwarts Legacy effect, mind you. What I mean by that is that you have this game that many people went, oh, it's a 7 out of 10 game, but because it's got the Harry Potter coat of paint, it goes up a notch. From top to bottom, I think Jedi Survivor is a very, very fun, well-designed video game. What I mean by that is non-Star Wars fans will still find something to absolutely love about Jedi Survivor. I think those who have soured on Star Wars will find the reason why they fell in love with the franchise in the first place. And I think those of you who are like me and absolutely adore this franchise, you'll just be enthused from start to finish, as this is one of the best Star Wars games we've ever received. But again, I must emphasize, it's just a damn good video game on its own. This is one of my favorites of the year. Let's talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you like day one reviews, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. Let's begin with the story. Gonna go extremely light on this one because to me, this was the most pleasant surprise. Not that Jedi Fallen Order was a bad story, but in Jedi Fallen Order, to me, what it felt like was this was the typical Star Wars story we see nowadays, where you have the prequels, the original trilogy, and then you have the new trilogy. And when you looked at that, typically every Star Wars story that was told was, let's thread the needle, let's fit something in between here. But the difference here with Star Wars Jedi Survivor is it feels like Respawn had paid their dues with Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and had earned a ton of trust to introduce some really exciting new things into the Star Wars universe with Jedi Survivor. It feels like it's much more different as a Star Wars story than just navigating the pre-established timeline, but here, it all feels like something truly brand new, which you can't say too often about the series. When you add on top of that, the production and presentation being evocative of a Star Wars movie in the best ways, it just added to it. The little touches of music filling in gaps of silence, droids whimpering in response to the banter of those around you, and even the way shots are handled. It's a lot like Respawn took a filming class for Star Wars for this entry, and a similar compliment was given by me to Guardians of the Galaxy. When I was playing that, I thought, the way shots are handled, the way transitions are done, it reminds me so much of Marvel, but yet it never forgets it's a video game. And it's the same thing here with Jedi Survivor. You can tell they're fans of Star Wars, and we'll get into that in a moment, but you can also tell that they remembered to keep it a video game. And to me as a Star Wars fan, I feel so respected with this, I almost don't know what to do with the experience. So let's just give a brief primer beyond that. Cal is struggling with being a Jedi who's used as a weapon for most of his life, and now he has to find a new way in a galaxy ruled by the Empire. And a lot of this story takes its time to find its footing. I don't think it means the story is aimless, though I wouldn't be surprised if some came to that conclusion. For the first handful of hours, there is a degree of meandering, because what's interesting about this story is it's set 5 years after Jedi Fallen Order, but a lot has happened in those 5 years. And as things have picked up since then in the ongoing Jedi Purge, you're trying to figure out where everyone's at in this point in the timeline. And that makes it ultimately all the more interesting as you start to fill in pieces of the puzzle on where everyone's at, their particular motivations, and how it all comes together in the end is, again, a thing of Star Wars beauty. What I will say this story excels at is character development. While I liked the crew in Jedi Fallen Order, I couldn't say I loved everyone. I liked Cal, I liked Cere, I liked Merrin, I liked Grease. They were all likable characters, but I didn't love any of them. Jedi Survivor made me love Cal. Jedi Survivor made me love Cere, love Merrin, love Grease. And I would say this game goes to the length of solidifying Cal Kestis as one of the best Star Wars video game characters up there with, yes, Revan, and even Starkiller to some degree. I really enjoyed the story. I don't want to say more than that, because while I could get into the thick of it, what I will just say is the general parameters are, this is about a 15 to 20 hour story, not really a crazy length at all. There's so much more meat around it where you will spend more time in Jedi Survivor if you indulge in the side content, which we'll talk about in a moment. But the pacing, I think, is really steady, and at first feels slow, but it all comes together. It makes sense. But also, for those of you who maybe aren't invested in it, I think you will still get something very good out of this and say, that was a dang good game. So I don't want to go further in on this story, because to me it matters that much. I do think it really is the thing that carries this game pretty hard, because while the gameplay is fantastic, I did have to fight through some performance concerns. Let's talk a bit about that, because when I announced I'm reviewing this game, I saw a shocking amount of people writing in on my tweet saying, just blink once if the performance is good, blink twice if it's not. What I will say is we reviewers are in a bit of a precarious position where I don't think anyone should be super definitive on where the performance is trending with this game. Now, I was handed a PlayStation 5 code for this game. The frame rate in the performance mode for this was hit or miss. Oftentimes, I was dropping well below 60 frames during big sections of the game. This was a consistent thing through and through. You'll even see it throughout some of the gameplay. This game drops frames often. I've spoken with other reviewers who I'm sure will share their thoughts. The PC port, not it from what I've been told. So keep that in mind as well. But the reason why it's a little bit of an interesting position here for Jedi Survivor is we were to review this game without the Day 0 patch, let alone the Day 1 patch. So keep in mind that I think a lot of reviewers' impressions of the performance is sort of a TBD. So I don't want to go too ham on it. And was it intrusive into my experience? No. The only intrusive thing were 3 crashes. And they all happened toward the end game when I was just exploring. That is where this game does fall apart on the technical front. For me, the frame rate was tolerable. It really wasn't bad. And I noticed during cinematics in particular, it would stutter. I would at least want to put this information out here so you're aware of it. But for me personally, I can't sit here and be like, it ran awful, it ruined my experience, because it didn't. But also, you just need to know about this stuff in case it does get worse with the Day 0 and Day 1 patch. All right, so let's talk about the gameplay. I said at the start of this that I feel like Respawn clearly has shown they're fans of Star Wars. And what I meant by that was, no, not just watching movies, I meant the games. This game reminds me a lot of Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. The detail in the lightsaber, the way when you drag it around and you make connection with certain objects in the universe, you can see how, for example, a bush nearby has been burnt by the lightsaber cutting through it. It's those little things like seeing a limb fall off in slow motion. Yes, the dismemberment of human limbs is finally here, but also the FOV of the camera, the way lock-on works when you double jump, even the sandworm level. Do you remember this from Jedi Knight Jedi Academy? You should. There is so much about this game that evokes that title, and I loved that game growing up. As I mentioned, as a Star Wars fan, I feel treated well here, but let me make sure to emphasize here that even if you're not a Star Wars fan, you will find appreciation in the density of the mechanics of this game, because boy, do they throw a lot at you. Let's start off with the familiar territory for those who have already played Jedi Fallen Order or have at least seen it. Yes, this is still very much a Souls-like experience, and I do think they have refined some of it and maybe even gone overboard on one particular department of it, which will sound like a nitpick, but trust me when I say when you play it, you'll see what I mean. What I mean by this Souls-like is Yes, you're still going to attack enemies and pretty much hammer away at their stamina gauge. Upon breaking that, you'll expose them and you'll be able to damage their health bar. You're going to parry your way all the way to a meditation point where you can rest here. When you rest here, enemies will respawn, so there is that consequence of getting your health back, getting your stims back, but it's not so much a Soulsborne style experience where this game is inaccessible. There are fair difficulty options, and there are certainly points where the difficulty ramps up where I do feel like they leaned more into that hardcore direction, especially for those who play on a higher difficulty. To me, that was exciting because some of the encounter balancing in Jedi Fallen Order I found questionable, where I managed to get through the highest difficulty of the game up until the point in the arena where I just tapped out. I said, this game's clearly not built for this in mind. But here, it feels like they did have time to refine, and I enjoyed my playthrough on not only the highest difficulty, but testing out some of the middling difficulty. It feels like they really had time to refine the experience with this time around. Where I do think they go a bit overboard with their love of Souls games is we all know that feeling of opening that nearby door that you saw when you first got to the bonfire, and then you see the bonfire again through that open door and you're like, oh my God, it was here the whole time, but I just took this huge trip. This game loves interconnected areas. If you sat down and said to Respawn, what defines a Souls-like game? Their answer would not be difficulty. It would be interconnected areas and shortcuts. This world is stitched together by zip lines, and there is a degree of ludonarrative dissonance, if I'm quite honest, where I'm just wondering who set all of this stuff up, man. It really did disconnect me a couple of times where there were moments it made sense where doors would be locked and eventually opened, but there were times there were zip lines across vast chasms that just made no sense, and while they were convenient, it started to look less like intricate level design and more like a bunch of areas in the game were just put together with Scotch tape. And I found that to be a little bit jarring as I was going around and exploring. This does become all the more problematic for me when you factor in the game's poor navigation system. It's one thing if you want to have that heads-up display, free experience, and you don't want to have waypoints all over the game. But then you have to guide the exploration of the title in that direction where that stuff won't be necessary. But with Jedi Survivor, this game is jam-packed with content and things to discover and things to unlock that you're constantly going to be pausing the game, opening your map, checking out where to go, closing it down, and so on and so forth. Even in the accessibility section, which is great, mind you, you can activate a navigation assist option and it just won't appear for you on screen, which I found a little bit frustrating. Look, I'm the first to call for AAA games to stop holding my hand. But this time around, it felt like the game's design needed that type of stuff because the level design is so stacked and interweaving that when you're bringing up these 3D maps and constantly lowering them and rotating them, it's so easy to just pause and check the map 3 times in 30 seconds to make sure you're just heading in the right direction. And so once you get to the end game, you've beaten it, you're just hunting around all these collectibles and whatnot, it can start to feel a little bit like a chore where the interconnected areas don't really, again, shine that light on good level building, but to me more of, oh, we built this cool thing and we kind of need to connect this area to that area. Just put a zip line there and yeah, that'll work. That's what it felt like to me at times. And I know it sounds nitpicky, and ultimately it does start to work in the game's favor, but I think it does shine a light on, I just need a mini-map, man. I need a mini-map, a map bar, a waypoint, just something to track my active objective. So I get what they were going for, trying to straddle the line of Souls-like, where you're HUD-free, versus AAA Star Wars game that kind of needs to guide the player. You can't have the best of both worlds here, and this is a perfect example as to why it would be a problem, because as you increase that scale, it wasn't a big deal in Jedi Fallen Order, but it is a big deal here in my book. With that said, this is still very much a Metroidvania-inspired game. There are collectibles and upgrades galore, as I said. There are ability upgrades, stim upgrades, music tracks, all these different currencies you can collect per planet. They absolutely went hard with it, where one of the big complaints with Jedi Fallen Order was, I'm just finding ponchos out here, man. Can you give me something else? They got you covered here. The exploration, while I found it to be a bit frustrating at times, the rewards at the end of them most times were exciting, whether it be perks as well, or perk slot upgrades, or skill points and whatnot. I mean, they really did jam this world full of things to find that were exciting. It's just sometimes getting there can be a bit of a pain in the butt. Now, with that in mind, this game, like a Metroidvania game, loves its movement to the point where, yes, you could put the 3D platformer tag right there under Jedi Survivor. It is not just a Souls-like game with its combat. You are going to be platforming with a capital P at times. And there was one particular stretch in this game where I will say it did overstay its welcome a little bit, where it was going 15 minutes of platforming per 30 seconds of combat. And I said, look, I appreciate the movement here, and I get what we're going for. I love the diversity as a Star Wars fan, but I want to swing my lightsaber a little bit. And it felt like there were stretches of the game where they really liked the platforming, I think a little too much compared to what they should have. But ultimately, this is where it goes into that second half experience. When it comes together, when you've got everything, you're equipped, you're good to go, oh boy, does it get rolling. And so that can lead to what I think some players will have is the first half of the game, don't even bother exploring. Don't even bother with anything else but the story. Get everything you need and then go do whatever you want. Because when you have all your tools and all your upgrades and you're good to go, this game feels like Star Wars Unlocked. Like you just do what you want, when you want, where you want. And it is very liberating. Like the grapple jumping in this game, it doesn't make any sense why these grapple balloons are out here, but they are fun to use. I love them so much. You get grapple hooks. You're able to do things like wall jumps, dashing in the air. I mean, this game goes hard on platforming, and it does feel good, which is great to say. But yeah, just expect to be jumping around a ton more in this game than you ever have in a Star Wars title. Bro, whoever sat down and said, what if Cal could play Bloodborne? Give that man a raise right now, because holy smokes. So you got a lightsaber in one hand, a blaster in the other, and based off the upgrade tree, I can counterattack people with the blaster stance. I mean, wow, it's so much fun to use. Like you're almost a fencer with your lightsaber, but then you'll get something like the crossguard stance and you'll just be this big tank with a claymore. And then you can dual wield. And so now you can get a little more aggro. So what happens is you have all these different stances that you can then upgrade when you're leveling up through the skill section, and you can start to tailor to your own play style. But what's really great about this is there's diversity as a play style for everyone, and they all feel different. For me, it felt kind of weird to not use the blaster stance. Like I was very comfortable with it. My performance was very different when I used something like, say, the dual wield stance. So that is where I think this game really excels in building something new, are those stances, because some enemy types are best for certain encounters. Sometimes you're going to want that defense heavy double blade lightsaber to deflect all the different blasters being shot at you. It can sometimes shine a light on, man, I wish I could just switch to these stances whenever. But what happens is whenever you go to a meditation point, you can change between these two stances and you can only have two equipped at any time. However, what this allows is pretty much the enemy variety to thrive. It really does put a spotlight on, wow, there are so many different types of encounters here, and they all feel fair and mostly balanced. I think the toughest time that I had with this game was when they threw aggressive melee weapon enemies at you alongside ranged weapon attackers, because the ranged weapon attackers don't wait until the melee enemies are done. They'll just all attack you at once. It can feel a little unfair during those times, but I think it's still balanced way better compared to what we've seen in Jedi Fallen Order. The scale for this game has been dramatically increased. I mean, they really do go borderline open world over on Kobo, I'll just say. And what will be packed within here are rumors for you to hunt down. You'll go to your saloon, you'll talk to a couple of people, pick up some scoops about what's going on in the local area, and you can go track these down. This is where the navigation issues can become a problem, but think of these as almost your side quests. And sometimes these rumors will lead you to more people who you can recruit that'll come back to your saloon, and they'll give you more rumors to go out and find more things in the open world. You can do bounty hunts, which are fun. There are puzzle chambers, which we already know Jedi Fallen Order had a ton of puzzles, and here in Survivor, I will say the puzzles were dosed out in a healthy manner. I feel like in Jedi Fallen Order, for a lot of people who don't like puzzles, they may have gone a little too hard on that. But for those of you who still don't like puzzles, I feel like you'll find them in Jedi Survivor, but they don't go crazy enforcing them. There's like a couple of handful mandatory ones where you got to stop and really think it through, but not nearly as much as Fallen Order, in my opinion. But it still has those. For those who like that Tomb Raider vibe, you still get that here in Survivor. There are plenty of puzzle chambers to go through. Now, with that said, I know you'll probably think, oh, he's going to go to the navigation complaint again. No, this does highlight that I'm glad I waited to explore by the end game. I tried to go off the beaten path multiple times during my review process while the story was ongoing, and it just felt like everywhere I went, I needed this upgrade or that upgrade or that upgrade, and it just felt like I was constantly hitting a brick wall. There was that de-incentivized feeling like I shouldn't be exploring here, even though the game's practically begging me to. So just again, a little bit of a reviewer's tip: wait till the credits roll and then really get into your exploration bag, all right? Trust me, you'll thank me later, because then you'll just be off the leash. You can do whatever you want. But when you play the game and try to explore as it is, you kind of just gotta get lucky and be like, oh, cool, I can go in here. There were so many times I'd go deep into a cave and find something. Sorry, you don't got what you need to get through here, and that would kind of stink. Now, I'm gonna wager a guess. You may be wondering, well, you called it the perfect sequel, yet you've listed a number of complaints as you've gone around. As a Star Wars fan, this game is everything I could have wanted and more. And I do think, even with its stumbles and hiccups with navigation, those types of concerns, that it still exceeds greatness. But I think for you out there, and I know many people are on the hate Star Wars train, I need to be fair. I need to be, as always, honest and let you all know that there may be things you'll trip up over. For me, none of these were really pure obstacles that stopped me from loving on this game. But they are things that demanded a certain play style that may not be something you're looking for. You may just want to say, I don't want to play the story. I just want to go off and explore. Well, guess what? You need a dash to get you through a green wall, and you can't go through that green wall until you unlock it in the main story, so go play the main story. This game very much incentivizes you to do that. But that's why I started with the story, because it is fantastic. Some of the best Star Wars we got, and the way they build out these open world sections and the things that you find within them, it's truly a really good time. But it does come with a couple of hiccups here or there that I think non-big Star Wars junkies will have some issues with. Those who are just looking for another cool AAA video game may stumble over. But I thought this game was truly fantastic. Like, easily a top 5, top 3 experience this year so far. Really, really liked it. Keep an eye out for performance concerns, but otherwise, to me, this is a pretty easy recommendation, especially if you're a Star Wars fan, or you just mildly enjoyed Star Wars, or you are a hurting Star Wars fan and you're looking for some sense of hope. This is your game. To me, Jedi Survivor is a triumph in being able to take core ideas and expand upon them in sensible manners, while also building a lovable cast of characters here that I really did feel for. Just gripping from start to finish, ultimately. And I'm still going back, still playing, still enjoying Jedi Survivor. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, those are my thoughts on this game. It's a wonderful time, and I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts. Please do fire away down below. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that, as it fuels all of the content we create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.